All right, so yesterday when I talked about sine and cosecant, I talked about a right triangle. So let's remember a right triangle. And I mentioned that the biggest side was called hypotenuse. That's the biggest side. Now the other two sides are either called opposite or adjacent, depending on where is my corner called theta, or where is my theta in my corner. So I'm just going to mention, let's call this corner theta. Now opposite is the side that is far away from theta. So this is going to be my opposite. And adjacent is the one side that is right next to theta, besides the hypotenuse. So I'm just going to call this side adjacent. Now, yesterday we talked about sine and cosecant. Today we're going to talk about cosine of theta, which I'm just going to abbreviate with the first letters, the first three, COS, cosine of theta. And then we're going to talk about secant of theta, which I'm just going to abbreviate it to the first three letters, SEC theta. Now, cosine, it has a fraction, it has a ratio. Now, the fraction we're going to use is going to be called adjacent over hypotenuse. That's the cosine of theta, adjacent over hypotenuse. Secant is the reciprocal. So what that means, I'm just going to go hypotenuse over adjacent. So for today's work, I need the adjacent side and I need the hypotenuse. For cosine, I'm going to go adjacent over hypotenuse. And for secant, I'm going to go hypotenuse over adjacent. So once again, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. All right, let's take a look at our nodes. Question number 5. Let me label my three sides. I see my 90 degrees. The one side that's far away from my 90 degrees is the hypotenuse. I'm going to abbreviate the letters as A for adjacent, O for opposite, and H for hypotenuse. Once again, the biggest side is hypotenuse. From theta, I see where theta is. The side that is far away from it is my opposite. So that means that 20 is the adjacent. Cosine, remember how I said is adjacent over hypotenuse? So I'm just going to go 20 over 25. Adjacent over hypotenuse. Simplify your fraction as much as you can. We know how to simplify fractions. So 20 over 25, I'm just going to call that 4 over 5. How do you type this? 4 backslash 5. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Let's take a look at question number 6. The biggest side, I see my 90 degrees. The biggest side is the hypotenuse. Now, I see where my theta is. The one side that is far away, this is my opposite. The one that is close to is my adjacent. I know for cosine, I have to go adjacent over hypotenuse. So I'm just going to go 6 over 6 radical 5. I'm going to simplify the fraction. First of all, the 6's cancel out. So I have 1 over radical 5. I simplify. And then remember I mentioned before in the previous unit, and I also mentioned yesterday, when we have a radical at the bottom, make sure you rationalize the denominator. And what that means is multiply top and bottom by that radical that you have at the bottom. So 1 times radical 5 is radical 5. Radical 5 times radical 5 is just 5. Because you guys could think, well, I can multiply the radicals, so that gives me radical 25. But isn't the square root of 25 just 5? So notice how when you multiply a radical by itself, you just get rid of the radical symbol. All right, so my answer is that. Radical 5 over 5. I cannot cancel those 5s because the 5 on the top is a radical, the 5 at the bottom is a whole number. I can cancel whole number with a whole number and a radical with a radical, but I cannot mix and match. So my answer is radical 5 over 5. How do I type this? Radical 5. So I do rad 5. Notice I put the 5 inside parentheses because there's a 5 inside the radical symbol. So I put rad 5, so radical 5 over, so backslash 5. Do not put any spaces. It's all together. So radical 5 over 5. Okay, let's take a look at question number 7. I'm going to label my side. The biggest side is the hypotenuse, right? It's the one side that is farthest away from the 90 degrees. I see where my theta is. The one side that is far away from theta is called opposite. The one side that is next to it is adjacent. For secant, I know I told you guys the ratio for secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. So I'm just going to go 5 over 3. It's okay that the big number is on top. I'm not going to make changes to a mixed number. I'm going to leave it as improper fraction. Just 5 over 3. How do you type this? 5 backslash 3. Right, 5 over 3. The same thing for question number 8. Let's take a look at question number 8. The big side is the hypotenuse. I see where theta is. The side that is far away, that's opposite. The side that is next to it is adjacent. Secant. I remember my ratio for secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. So I'm just going to say this is 19 over 8 radical 3. When I see my big numbers, 19 over 8, nothing I can do. I cannot simplify. However, I cannot have radicals at the bottom. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by radical 3. So that gives me on the top, I have 19 radical 3. Remember, a whole number and a radical, I cannot combine them. I cannot multiply them. So I just write both of them. 19 times radical 3 is 19 radical 3. Now at the bottom, radical 3 times radical 3 is just 3. Now 3 multiplied with 8, that gives me 24. I take a look at my whole numbers, 19 over 24. If we can simplify them, by all means, simplify. In this case, we cannot, but if you could, do simplify. My answer is 19 radical 3 over 24. How do you type this? 19 rad 3 over 24.